to you by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey.
Welcome to CAUCUS, New Jersey. I'm Steve Adubato. You know, returning to life after military service clearly is not easy. Many veterans come home and need our support. Joining me in the studio today to discuss what needs to be done to improve the quality of care for our military heroes, we have Emily Feiner, Chief of Social Work for the VA, New Jersey Healthcare Services. Lloyd Deans, Mental Health Supervisor for Vets for Warriors. Marcy Felsenfeld, Senior Program Officer at the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey. And finally, Patricia Findley, Special Assistant to the Dean of Interprofessional Health Initiatives at Rutgers University. And at Rutgers, they also have Veterans House, which is?
It's a one-stop center for veterans who are students within the university for everything from registration to counseling to tutoring. It's a great center.
And Patricia's comments are right on the mark because this entire half hour is dedicated to doing a couple things. First of all, we're going to have a candid conversation about what some of the needs of our heroic veterans are coming home, men and women. But also talk about where those services are, how they can get those services. And let me ask you, Marcy, the foundation, very dedicated to helping veterans organizations. $736,000 of grants. Going to what organizations to do what?
We've been giving to veteran-serving charities or nonprofits for more than 15 years. 2 years ago, we released a request for proposals looking for projects that could engage even more veterans in health-seeking behaviors and mental health services. We've funded direct mental health services for veterans and their families. We funded outreach programs to bring veterans in, female veterans specifically. We have funded advocacy programs to help veterans who have other than honorable discharges.
Well, stay on that for a second. That whole issue of veterans who have something less than honorable discharge, there's be so many areas we cover. Why would that be an issue, and what does that have to do with mental health?
Many veterans who exhibit challenging, difficult behaviors are occasionally dismissed or discharged from the military with an other than honorable condition. Right. There are about 5 different types, and depending on where you are, you can access different levels of benefit. One of the things that is extremely challenging is if a soldier experiences military sexual trauma, experiences a brain injury, has some sort of a post-traumatic stress reaction. Sometimes that manifests itself in substance use, aggressive behaviors, in the types of behaviors that can get you kicked out without the support that you need.
And finally,
so for veterans who have undiagnosed PTSD,
post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yes,
right.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Once that's diagnosed, they can work through the military mechanisms to try and get an upgrade so they can then access the level of services and care they need from the VA.
And a group of lawyers who are in fact working to do just that, correct?
Yes, and it is a tremendous burden. It's very challenging for these soldiers.
And imagine, that's just one of the needs we're talking about. And by the way, you mentioned women veterans. We're going to talk about some of the unique issues they face. So we're talking about mental health issues. We're talking about housing and homeless. We're talking about homelessness issues, employment. Let's take these one at a time. And by the way, they're all related in so many ways. Employment. Why is it so challenging for so many returning heroic veterans to find gainful employment?
I think a lot of it, and thank you again, I think a lot of it is stigma related, right? Because
for serving?
Well, for coming home, right? Because you think about just some of the coverage that's going on right now, and you're saying a lot of our veterans are coming home with PTSD and things of that nature. So a lot of employers are like, oh, well, we don't know yet. We don't want to take a chance. Let's let them stay home for a little while longer and get kind of acclimated back to coming back home and civilian life. So that's part of the problem right there.
That's so interesting. We're talking about people who served our country. By the way, it's tough enough. We do programs on prisoner reentry, right? We're talking about soldier reentry. Am I making?
Absolutely, because the last thing an employer wants is their name on the front page of the New York Times. The employer lets veteran go because of health issues or mental health issues. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a significant problem.
Have had experiences out, especially combat veterans, where they've worked as a team doing amazing things. You know, they've been doing one thing and then they've had to protect their fellow combat participants, and then they've like been putting out fires, and then they've been, you know, building a building. And
what can't they do?
Right.
Any employer wants someone like that.
But look at what was just said, the stigma part.
Yes.
Do you actually believe there is some stigma as opposed to some incredibly patriotic, terrific thing that an employer is doing by hiring a qualified vet?
I don't think it's either or. I think you have both. So I think you do have people who buy into the stigma. I think we also have veterans who don't know how to translate their military experience for civilian employers. You know, if you've been in the infantry, there is no equivalent job out here. So we talk to veterans when they come into the VA and say they can't find a job. We have Department of Labor folks from the state who come in and work specifically with veterans to help train them how to talk about their military experience in civilian terms. I am a great team player. I'm really good in a crisis. I know how to think on my feet. That kind of thing is something that'll help a veteran get a job.
It's so interesting as you talk about this, as someone who's thinks an awful lot about communication and leadership. It struck me that what you just said, and the way, dare I use the word branding, how one brands him or herself. You just, it seems to me, just said that one of the challenges, one of the needs, is to help returning veterans position themselves in the marketplace. That is a need.
Absolutely.
And how do we train for that?
That's exactly where something like Rutgers, a university, comes into play, is we need to make our systems friendly for these returning veterans. They're coming into a system where undergraduates might be partying all night. This is not the system that you would want to enter, I'm sure.
Right.
Your structure, you're older. So Rutgers understands that. So we might house our veterans in graduate housing, where they can be separated from the larger dorms. They're also dealing with the GI Bill. And we know the government sometimes pays late. They pay late, they lose their housing. Then they're deregistered from courses. And then that strikes up a lot of the issues that their mental health might be affected. They might have a PTSD episode from being kicked out. So we intervene. And then we also do a lot of counseling around what kinds of programming would they like to do? What do they want as a next step after military? A lot of them do want to become police officers, security. But carrying a gun might not be the best thing for somebody with PTSD.
Yeah. Let me come back. Marcy, let me ask you this. You mentioned women. What specific needs would women veterans have that we might not understand?
I mean, there are so many issues that women face when they're not in the military going overseas, but certainly military sexual trauma is one,
Quote,
significant
I'm sorry for interrupting.
area.
Military sexual trauma. Help us understand that.
Rape in the military setting.
Unreported, not dealt with.
Could be.
Not, and this woman not being helped while in the military. I don't want to assume all these things. But
Yes, I mean that is one issue that comes up often. The other issue is if a woman is going back and forth between the U.S. and overseas, the relationship that she might have with her children and her spouse and the other caregivers. There are some percentage of military women who have children with special needs. If they're constantly moving around the United States, once you figure out one system, school system, you might be going to another, then you're going overseas and you're coming back. So there can be sort of a compounding effect of being both in your family and then away on a mission.
how do we help them?
One approach I know that Cornerstone Family Service in Morristown takes is to create a peer community, to find ways to bring women who are veterans together. And it might not be for group therapy, it might be for cooking, it might be for exercise, it might be for the things that they might not necessarily have time for themselves. They can pair that with babysitting, and they can create a support group of women who have similar experiences who might not feel supported when they go to veterans serving organizations where they are in a minority.
And you support it, and the foundation is
Yes.
supporting them. Let me go back. Vets for Warriors, and the foundational, the website will be up for Vets for Warriors. Let folks know, and by the way, you are a vet.
That's right.
Make it clear what the organization is, because it does important things.
Okay. So Vets for Warriors provides 24/7 personalized peer support services for our veterans, active duty soldiers, and their families. So think about it as your personal concierge service, 24/7, right?
Vet calls up 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hello,
What
how you
happens?
doing? How can we help you? What's the problem?
A
What's
real
the issue?
person.
Live, within 30 seconds. That's one of our unique features. So, you know, you don't have to listen to a voicemail or navigate through a phone tree, for example. You call up or chat online 24/7, and you get a live person.
How important is that immediate connection?
Wow. So, very important, right? And you think about it in the mindset of a veteran, depending upon the situation they're calling for. So if it's emergent, and less than 2% of our phone calls, by the way, are emergencies, rather. We do have clinicians that work with us as well, licensed clinicians 24/7, that can help coach us through the call or even take the call over. But how important is that? So if you are someone that's in crises and you need to speak to someone right now, and you're calling, the last thing you want to hear is a voicemail or, we'll be back tomorrow at 9 in the morning. You want to speak to another battle buddy that's kind of been there.
Yeah. When we come back, I'll tell you what I want to talk about. Housing. Homelessness.
Okay.
We've talked to some of the veterans programming that we've done in the past, and I'm struck by the number of vets who find themselves struggling to find a place to live and then wind up either at Penn Station in Newark or some other place without a home. So we'll continue talking about helping our heroes, the veterans who have given so much to our country, with this terrific panel right after this. Stay with us.
To see more Caucus New Jersey with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD, and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
We're talking about how to help our veterans. Real quick, we'll talk about the VA first, and we're going to go around, but I'll come back to the issue of homelessness and housing issues. Accessing the health care services at the VA, talk about it.
Any veteran with an honorable discharge or a general under honorable conditions is eligible for VA care within 5 years of discharge from active combat duty in Iraq or Afghanistan.
By the way, excuse me, can we put up the VA's information as we keep talking? Go ahead.
And there are other veterans that are eligible based on various other things, but they are free to bring in their discharge to any VA facility and sign up, and they can also sign up online through e-benefits and request an appointment at their nearest facility, and we will call them up. We will schedule an appointment. We do not have horrendous wait times. We get veterans in within 2 to 4 weeks for their initial primary care appointment. And for combat veterans in particular, the VA is very sensitive to common conditions that arise out of a combat experience. So we're going to screen them for all kinds of conditions that does not happen in an outside community-based provider's office.
Are enough of the veterans who need the services of the VA using the services of the VA?
Probably not, because enough would be 100% of those that need it getting it, and we know 100% don't do it.
Before I get to the housing issue and homelessness, families of vets.
VA services, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, are directed towards the veteran, him or herself. And families are impacted by everything that has happened to a soldier. And there are community-based organizations that are specifically doing couples therapy, doing family therapy, and that is not something that's available to them through the system.
So
We
what
do
do they
marital.
find?
We do marital.
Right.
But that's hard. We miss that sometimes. We're talking. It's hard enough to get help for vets. Then their families, right? Do we miss that the children and the spouses, the significant others of vets, right?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's newer. It's because
It's newer, meaning
historically families were not covered under the VA at all. They're covered through the Department of Defense. But by congressional mandate, if you look historically, until George W. Bush was in office, we did not cover families. It's because of the number of brain injuries that we're beginning to see. We realized the VA could not do it without the family and the community support.
Can we move to the issue of housing? Why has it been so difficult for so many heroic veterans to find a place to live?
Man, if I had the answer for that, I'll be a wealthy person right now, right? But the fact of the matter is, you know, when vets are coming out or transitioning from active duty service into the civilian life, it's so many challenges right there. And think about it too in terms of what they were going through before joining the military, right? So they could have been in a bad situation previously, and now they're going through combat. Now you have a compounded situation on top of that. So. And part of it is our onus in terms of the VA and the DOD, right, to really screen our vets when they're transitioning out to make sure we capture some of the signs and things they're going through. But it's just an unfortunate cycle that we're in right now.
And by the way, you can't separate the housing issue from the employment issue. So if we're talking about how difficult it is for a vet to find gainful employment, for he or she to have a good job, how could you separate that from the housing issue?
You really can't. And as I mentioned, with this current military, it's all volunteer. So people are coming back as ones and twos into small-town communities. Previously, World War II, Vietnam, they're coming back as groups. So there'd be some support. So they're going back and they're not fitting in because they didn't fit in before. They can't find the jobs because of the mental health issues. Some of them are dishonorably discharged. So it's a combination of very complex issues that are feeding into the housing and employment issues.
So what did you do? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, sometimes people self-medicate with alcohol and drugs, and over time can sort of burn through their support system. So they could be housed and employed for the first couple of years, and then over time, as their systems break down, they end up in difficult situations.
I've often thought that, you know, when we've interacted with a lot of veterans and we meet on this program, this series, or in all of our work in public broadcasting, we meet veterans. We actually had a captain here earlier today who served and is involved in a program with one of the colleges to teach aviation. And I remember just when I introduced him, I thanked him for his service because it's something that I do, and most of us do it. And I think to myself, what does the veteran often think? Not that there's a monolithic group of veterans, but we often say we thank you for your service to our country. Does that rhetoric, I don't want to get overly philosophical, but does that rhetoric often sound hollow? We thank you for your service, but then there are so many struggles that veterans have. We thank you for your service, but like that's it. How did you deal when you came back? And was that enough for you? We thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for your service. You know, for me, it's always a surprise when somebody says that. I'm like, oh, yeah, no problem. You know, that's no problem.
Yeah, no problem.
You know, because it's what we do. It's our job, right? So you don't really second guess or anything like that.
Yeah, but to the rest of us, you know, who, whatever. Go ahead. It's a big deal.
In terms of transition, you know, what's important to me or what helped me through my transition was my family.
It was your family?
Yeah, my family unit, back to what we were discussing before. And strong family, mother, girlfriend, now wife, was all there with me from the deployment, from actually basic to deployment and back. So having a real full cycle of everything. And I think that's very important, right? Having some type of stability back home for you, so when you come home, you kind of have a soft landing. But in terms of really speaking about my issues or situations, it's really my battle buddy or the VA that
the battle buddy.
Yeah, you know, the soldiers that I served with over in Iraq.
How'd you stay tight with them?
Say it again?
How did you stay tight with them?
Wow. Through deployment, you know, it's really just staying focused on our missions and really engaging with each other. And
but afterwards, how did you stay connected with them?
Oh, man, we still hang out, right? They're all police officers, or the majority of them are police officers for a great state of New Jersey. And it's really communicating, man, just not giving up or not letting go of that connection.
But the fact that you found yourself doing what you are doing today, vets helping vets,
yeah.
How important is that?
It was a blessing. You know, I worked for the private sector before, J&J and other companies, but this is the first time that I found a job that I have a meaning and a purpose for, right? And so I wake up every day and I help veterans. I mean, there's nothing better than that.
Wow. Wow.
I know what you mean.
Okay, veterans helping veterans.
Yeah.
Let's talk about veterans helping veterans. Anyone want to jump in on this? How important is it for a veteran? Listen, anyone helping is important, but veterans helping veterans.
Veterans helping veterans is so important because when we start as a social worker working with someone, they ask me, are you a vet? And I'll say, I'm not, but help me understand. So we've actually created programs called Operation Veterans to Social Workers, where we're training veterans to become social workers because we want to help. And speaking to the point that not all veterans go to the VA, we know 70% don't.
70% don't. Mm-hmm. Do we know why?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, and the Healthcare Foundation is actually helping out with a grant around that. We have a veteran going out in Newark, finding veterans who aren't going.
Hold on a second. I want to understand the grant. What is the grant for? I'll come back to it. What is the grant?
We send a veteran out into the community to find veterans who are not affiliated with the VA. We either encourage them to go sign up, or we provide services for them through our clinics.
Actually going out and getting them.
Yeah, out in the
Bring them to the VA.
Bringing them to the clinic at Rutgers and doing counseling with them, doing medical services for them. It's free for them, provided through the Healthcare Foundation support.
Right.
And then we try to get them into the VA if they're willing.
Right.
But a lot of them don't want to go to the VA.
Why?
There's a stigma around the VA.
They're done. You know, they come out, they're done. The feds are just, they're done. They don't even want to be a part of it.
The VA is the feds.
Yeah, to them, it's very interesting. Veterans will come in and they'll call me ma'am, and they'll call the hospital the post or the base. It's to them, it's all part of the same system. But you know, in the VA, at least 50% of our employees are veterans.
Yes.
Is that right?
And veterans are given priority for many of our jobs. So we often have veterans helping veterans, and it does make a difference.
Yeah. Jump back in.
This brings up the tremendous issues related to the stigma of mental illness and mental health. So if somebody wants to be a police officer or wants to go into security, there's concern that if you are being treated for PTSD, if you are accessing mental health services from the feds, from the government, even from a private practitioner, that can follow you and cause challenges for you in employment.
Wait a minute, hold on. So someone serves, does this heroic thing. You just say, doing my job, but not everyone sees it that way. Is then going to deal with a health issue, happens to be a mental health issue. Works to get that dealt with, whatever that means. Then he or she chooses to wants to become a law enforcement professional. And just by acknowledging it and trying to have that dealt with proactively, he or she is now penalized?
Whether it's rational or not.
But that is what often plays out. So therefore, is that vet often not seeking out the help for fear that he or she would be stigmatized?
And we have a lot of veterans who serve in the Guard and the Reserves, and they are police officers. And then they are deployed. They come back with PTSD. They need the help, but they have to go through a fitness check once a year. And they have to sign something saying that, you know, I'm going to tell you whether or not I'm in mental health treatment.
They have to tell you that?
They have to tell
And
their
sign
employer. So they worry about acknowledging the problem exists because they worry they're going to lose, you know, they might have 15 years in the system. They're trying to get to 20 to get their retirement.
Final comment to the vets out there watching. What do you say to them? We say, listen, I don't want to tell anybody my business.
Hey, you got to speak to someone, man. And if you're going to talk to someone, call Vets Force. Again, we're 24/7. Your family, friends, you know, you got to talk about it. Absolutely.
The alternative is not acceptable.
Yes. Well, we don't want to talk about the alternative, but.
Thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for what you are doing today. Thank all of you for what you are doing every day to help the people who are heroes and have given so much to our country. I could not think of a more meaningful panel for us to be involved in.
I work for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm a catastrophic case manager. I'm a nurse. I feel a sense of responsibility to each and every member that I speak with on the phone. I know where they live, I know their towns, I know the hospitals they go to. A lot of times I know their physicians, and I love helping people at very difficult times of their lives. The job I have now is the perfect job for me. I think I was born a nurse.
Also brought to you by Gary's Wine and Marketplace, the Russell Berry Foundation, and by NJM,